This week's episode of DisruptEDTV. This week I have two fabulous guests with me in the studio. Steve has swanned off to America to look at a school, so hopefully we'll hear about that next week. But in the studio with me this afternoon, I have the fabulous Justine Munro and Faye Langdon from 21C Skills Lab, and we're going to be talking about how we can ensure that our young people are future ready. So before we go any further, can you tell us each about yourselves and how you came to start the company 21C Skills Lab? I've been lucky enough to be, friends of 21C Skills Lab from inception, but I think there's a really interesting story as to how you arrived at 21C Skills Lab and the work that you're doing at the moment.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Claire. We're delighted to be on DisruptEDTV, and it's always great to chat with you. So look, 21C Skills Lab was started about 2.5 years ago now, and it's one of the chain of ventures that Faye Langdon and I have sort of brought to the market in New Zealand over the last decade or so, which really responds to a big need we've seen in ensuring that everyone in New Zealand's able to fulfil their potential, no matter where they grew up and what their circumstances. We are absolutely passionate about Aotearoa New Zealand and the young people that are in it and that are walking fast towards their future. We want to make sure that they're as ready as they can be. So the 21C Skills Lab actually came out of an experience we had in starting up an organisation called Tuputoa, which is a Māori and Pacifica interning organisation. So we were concerned as global women members that we weren't seeing Māori and Pacifica people moving through into leadership roles in corporate New Zealand. And we wanted to bring young people together with employers, young people who wanted those opportunities and who were absolutely ready for them, and employers who didn't know how to reach them and didn't know how to have the right conversations. So that led to an amazing organisation called Tuputoa, which big shout out to, just had its gala dinner last night and 200
incredible event.
Yeah. So
amazing.
But I think during the process of building Tuputoa, we recognised that here were young people who were immensely talented in so many of the skills that we now call 21st century skills. They were entrepreneurial, they were creative, they were collaborative, they understood teamwork, they were resilient, they were tenacious. And they didn't value those skills. They thought that succeeding in education meant getting
NCEA.
And they would say things like, I'm just a C student, or I'm not smart enough, and we'd be looking at them and just thinking, you are amazing and New Zealand needs you. So it was that experience in working with them, combined with what I was seeing with my own daughter, who was learning an essay for NCEA.
Do you mean that's not getting them future ready?
And we thought it's time to really bring what we have in terms of great relationships with business, and understanding the needs of business and that what business needs to have in terms of agile, flexible, creative, collaborative, globally competent workers, and to doing what we can to ensure that the education system is ready to deliver those people. So that was the genesis of 21C.
Yeah, and your background, Faye, I mean, you've both got incredible backgrounds in terms of your serial entrepreneurial endeavours.
Thanks, Claire. We are indeed. And I look, and thanks. I think Justine's really nailed it. And for us, it was about really being passionate about our young people. And I think just to expand further on the tupitoa was we listen to these young Māori and Pacific youth go, you know, we know how to do tangis, we know how to do the wakaama, you know, we do the kapahaka, but all the skill sets that are required in those were not valued or recognised in the classroom, or they didn't translate into opportunities for them, and they felt that they were quite invisible or they were put to the back of the classroom. So it was about, we have 122,000 of them out in South Auckland, and for me it was about how do we enable these students to really get the reach and, you know, to really harness that talent and capability that they have that is very place-based and is immersive for them and that's real to them. And the other part for me is working with global women, seeing our young leaders come through, and even in our leadership in New Zealand there were still skill gaps. So, you know, there's no part of us that's perfect, but I think it's all of us really stepping in to that tension and being prepared to be the change makers.
So I sort of hear those
Lots
sort of threads coming through around us identifying the actual skills that are needed, and what are the things that matter, but also our measures of success and how we're measuring success within our schools, within society. I think we've got a massive conversation that we need to kick off, and I'm concerned that the work that's going on with the NCA review, with the NZC review, is potentially not going to be courageous enough around this conversation. So, I mean, your tagline is 21C Skills Lab. You know, that's the name of your company. What do you see as the really important skills that our young people need to succeed today, to thrive in the current context?
Well, we have a framework that we use, which is drawn from the work of the World Economic Forum, the Centre for Curriculum Redesign, and I guess it's a really tangible way of expressing to kids, to parents, to whānau as well as teachers what we need to be preparing, or each of us need, and we call it the Know, Use, Be, Grow framework. So know is new areas of knowledge that have become sort of the new 3Rs, the new basics, and that's things like digital literacy, entrepreneurship, global competence, design thinking skills, well-being. Those are all key areas of how to do stuff that we really expect our kids to know. And just to give you one example of that, financial literacy. My daughter recently, my poor kids are my guinea pigs, but my daughter recently was in this sort of challenging situation of being part of the gig economy and was asked to sign a contracting agreement with a cleaning company. Had absolutely no idea what the difference was between being a contractor and an employee, how to think about tax. And her first question is, why didn't we learn any of this at school? And I guess that our children will be gig economy workers. They need to understand how to form a company. They need to understand how to insure themselves to get protection. So that's just a key area of knowledge that's new because of the gig economy. We're not part of these massive companies and one of the employees. So the knowledge skills, the use skills are sometimes called the 4Cs, and it's what you need to actually take that knowledge and make things happen. So that's the critical thinking, the collaborative problem solving, the communication, the creativity. So that's what lets things come alive. The third area is the B skills, the social and emotional skills, and that's things like the tenacity, the resilience, the curiosity, the openness, and in study after study, employers have said that those are most important. If you can be a genius and have the highest NCA scores in the world, but if you can't actually work with a team, if you can't communicate your ideas, if you're not resilient when things go wrong, actually not that much use in the workforce. So those social and emotional skills are just the glue that holds
and we're seeing more and more stats and more examples of young people caving in when they haven't got that sense of well-being and those skills as well.
Exactly. And look, the final one is the most exciting one in a way because it's grow. It's the growth mindset. And the reality is that all of us in the 21st century are constantly learning. We have to really break down this idea that learning happens in schools and universities.
Some learning happens in schools. At least I hope some learning happens in schools. But you're right,
But
it goes bigger and beyond.
Learning is every day. You know, the half-life of skills now is, 3 to 4 years, and especially in technological spaces. So learning has to happen constantly, and our businesses that we're working with are telling this all the time. They're setting themselves up as learning organisations. So young people have to have that skill of constant learning, of understanding they have a gap and filling it, their whole lives.
So it's just a constant cycle of that learning, unlearning, relearning that we hear about. And so what is it that we need to change? I think in terms of, I've got lots of ideas about how we need to change schools, and I say that as from the position of being a teacher and a school leader. From your position, where I know that you've had time in the classroom, I know that you are half in the school and half out. What are some of the key changes you think that we need to be seeing happening in our schools? What's the changes that we need?
And look, Claire, I think our schooling system is based on a 19th or 20th century model.
Yeah.
We have a bell that goes at the end of the day that used to be for industrial workers. What we have to start looking at is how do we enable schools to become very much teachers to make that transition to coaches and facilitators.
Yeah.
And that's a big leap. So we've got a lot of capability building that we need to do. We need to also really enable our students to become immersed in learning. I think back to Justine's point, that we are going to constantly learn, relearn, unlearn, and keep relearning again. Yeah. We also really need to have it place-based. And that we have to actually start to enable our system to become quite fluid.
But by place-based,
biggest challenge. At the moment, our schools, as I said, are industrial, fortress mentality. So how do we enable them to actually really engage in all facets and enable that project-based learning, that that immersive learning, that entrepreneurial learning, and how do you enable a range of people that are amazing coaches and facilitators to come from the community, to come from business, and to let our educators move the same way. So there's a lot of flex that needs to occur in that system.
And we've got to be courageous in terms of there's this constant toing and throwing around sort of knowledge and skills as if it's binary and there's only one or the other. And this, I feel like we do a step forward in terms of people moving beyond siloed subjects, starting to do integrated work, starting to do project-based learning. And then there seems to be like a nervousness that kicks in, and we nearly see a real pushback against all of that stuff, and we get the voices of those sort of knowledge purists and subject purists really pushing back hard. And I've got real concerns that where we're going with our different reviews around the NCA and curriculum, that if we're not careful, we might miss an opportunity to really transform our system.
I agree, Claire, and I think, you'll probably have the stats to hand, but how many 40% of our kids go on to university, but yet universities are driving a
university entrance and table A subjects and table B subjects.
What exactly drives a massive amount of what happens in the senior years, and that we see that infecting the whole rest of school, if not down into the junior classroom. So I think we've got to ask, what is the point of this, and who is controlling the system? And when you get stats like 95% of employers in the latest Business New Zealand type studies are not satisfied with the skills of school leavers, then the system that actually employs these people is telling you whether you're passing or failing, and we're failing. So although we might be generating kids that can achieve academically in ways that universities require, the cost of doing that for the whole system, which is actually about thriving and building a thriving economy and a thriving community, it's not fit for purpose.
No.
So whilst of course we have to create academic pathways and ensure that young people can go on to technical skills areas, you can't be a doctor unless you actually have deep knowledge of medicine and how the body works and everything else. You can't be a builder without understanding some engineering and some maths and things like that. But a huge amount of the toolkit that all workers require is now these transferable skills, because we pick up that knowledge on the job. We have a framework in our heads of how it works. I mean, how many times have you sat with a doctor the other day? We Googled most of the conversation we were having.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of what parents can do and families can do to either support the young people in schools where things might not be changing up, like how can they support the young person, but also how can they support their schools? Because often, there's a real place for boards and for parents to be a voice that is encouraging change.
And Claire, I think what's really important is that parents have to actually step up into this and now become strong advocates. They've been quite a silent voice because we have had the walls of the school up. The walls now need to come down. And it's really parents need to start to think about the questions they're having with their children, and rather than saying, what do you want to do when you're leaving school? And that may be a very linear pathway that they took. They need to go, what problem do you want to solve? And therefore
change the conversation and the narrative that we're having.
And then what sits behind that? What is a purpose that you have? What intent do you want? What's your passion? Because out of understanding what problem do you want to solve, and that might be, they may have an interest in science, but you may have an amazing kid that's an opera singer, and they want to blend those worlds. So how do they go about doing that? And parents have got to step into a brave new frontier, really. And
it's going beyond the coding and like we tend to have that perception of what future focused job is, and we can default to some very simplistic sort of concepts of those future jobs and roles, and it's understanding the idea that there's going to be multiple roles and your job is going to be evolving and your career is going to be evolving as well.
I just think really respecting that the importance of creativity. Play, as we think through those early years that children have and what they learn through play and the power of that. And I was just coming back, Tim Brown at IDEO is just so fantastic, and I adore him, and he just goes, our greatest weapon that we have to unleash is our creativity in these really challenging, uncertain, complex times. If we apply the power of creativity, if we enable our children and us as adults to really start to think, what does creativity look like? That does become a very powerful weapon that we can harness for good.
Do you reckon we need to get rid of NCA altogether? Get rid of high-stakes assessment altogether?
I'm going to come to that, but because I love that question, Claire, but I just wanted to throw in another thing for parents here, and everyone is a metaphor around explore and exploit, which I think really, really matters, that basically our brains can be either in an explore mode or an exploit mode. And as young children, their brains are built for exploration, and that is where they are learning vast amounts of material in quite a different way, by playing and by testing and things.
For the sake of learning.
For the sake of learning, because it's just fun, and it's and that type of exploratory thinking, without all the masks and the strictures and the structures around it, is actually what we need to solve the big problems that we have. Because exploitative thinking and very rigid outcomes thinking is not going to solve climate crises and challenges of inequality across globally. So by locking children into exploitative outcome-focused NCEA grades, here can we segue into your thing, but frameworks too early, and not sitting with them and loving their exploration and encouraging that exploration for as long as we possibly can, we do our whole world a disservice.
Because I do worry about this idea of sort of playing with the concept of NCEA, and really in a sense we're sort of still staying within the lines with our colouring in terms of the work that we're doing at the moment. We're still staying within the constructs, and if anything, more structured constructs around subjects and NCEA. And in a sense, we might be missing the point. And I do believe that there's an argument for what you measure is what people focus on in schools, and I can understand that people might want to retain that real focus on NCA, and it's a way of sort of, in a sense, dictating what people are focusing on through their teaching and learning by dictating what the assessments look like and what it is that they're assessing. But I just don't know if it's going to cut the mustard in terms of the stuff that you're talking about, in terms of the stuff. we're part of a Creative Schools Index project with Peter O'Connor at Auckland University at the moment, and he's talking about the power of creativity, and what you see is year on year on year as they go through high schools, they're engaged in more and more high stakes learning. Creativity goes out the window because they become risk averse. They're focused on the outcomes. They're taking fewer risks. I mean, there's many schools doing great things to try and re-energise senior school curriculums, and I'm really proud of the work that we're doing around impact projects for that. But at the same time, I don't know if we're going to transform the system with the work that we're doing at the moment.
Claire, look, and I think we've really got to come back to that. We now know human-centred skills and us being humans is most probably the most powerful resource and asset that we have. AI is going to come through, and yes, it may take 30% of the jobs, but with that, there's going to be a whole lot more jobs that are created that are so exciting, but those jobs are going to require that high problem solving, critical thinking, teamwork, collaboration. So we need to go, what sort of framework do you need that lets students assess themselves as they're moving through this learning?
And
in
real
NCA,
time,
that is
and
rote learning, it's not going to cut it. So therefore, we've actually got to throw the playbook out and go, if we're moving with AI, and AI and climate change are the two most biggest issues that we are now going to face. And as parents and as schools, we have really got to step into this. So
yeah, I think, there's some fascinating systemic questions here, because I think what's happening is that by, we are and you are focusing on schools and compulsory schooling, we're trying to radically deconstruct that. But then we move to the next part of the system, which is our tertiary education system, and we are basically still going through a process where those organisations need kids sorted, and they have to sort them by capability and intellectually and things, so that they can slot them into different categories within pretty much degrees that still look like the degrees from 200 or 300 years ago in many cases. So, we still have employers who are still hiring people on the basis of their grade point averages. So we have, the whole system has incentives in it, which is why it's structured like it is, because it's incentivised to be like that. So, if we were in China, we could reorganise the entire system overnight, and places like Hong Kong, or Singapore, are able to do that more than countries like New Zealand, Australia, and the US. But
and sometimes that radical change is a terrifying thought.
If you really want to actually change out the whole system, you can't really do that in this type of country. But I think what we can do is do that prototyping work, and it's by seeing, for example, a relationship that Swinburne University has with some of the schools in Melbourne, where the secondary school basically certifies that kid is able to run their own business.
So basically we're starting to see schools do the work around, and I know there's that one in Melbourne. I saw an article about some schools in Sydney that are doing, I'm sure they're all connected, where they're working directly with the universities and saying, we'll get a portfolio of work together, you look at the portfolio.
And Templestowe is the same. You have to do a business. So I think we have got models that we can look to, and we've got to be really courageous here. Maybe we need to use a cluster of the DisruptED schools
and we
to
need,
lead this.
And we need businesses who get it too. So, it greatly annoys me. I was, with some gorgeous third-year uni students over the holidays who were obsessing about their grade point averages. And I was like, where's the exploratory thinking? Where's my world is just radically opening up. I'm spending time, in the quad talking to all these different people. It wasn't there. It was basically head down work, and why they were doing that was because they were facing up against graduate hire systems that were totally focused on marks, and that's still happening despite so many of the conversations we've had over the last decade. So I think it requires courageous firms, courageous organisations, courageous schools, courageous tertiaries.
We have the example of the fantastic open letter that a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now, talking about not worrying about tertiary qualifications, but it's that next step, isn't it? It's sort of coming back, and I think you're right, banding together and coming up with some prototypes and some ways around it is definitely a next step. And coming back to the land of what we can affect and what we can do right now. You've got some really interesting projects under the way at 21C Skills Lab. Can you tell us a little bit about, you've got your Like a Boss program and you've got internships, and I know you will undoubtedly have another number of other things on the horizon, because that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You don't just do one thing ever.
You go to the lab.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. And look, I think Lab again came about because we recognised that at that year 7 to 10 in our intermediate and high schools, our students could just not access that real world learning that enabled them in this gig economy that's now operating. I've got a gorgeous niece and she absolutely operates that gig economy with multiple jobs, and they're always on the hustle, the side hustles that these young people that are really onto it and understand that system totally get it.
Yeah.
So Like a Boss, 10 modules, plug and play on a teachable platform, just fantastic, fully resourced for teachers, fully resourced for students. But the most powerful learning is about they have to come together as a team and they have to decide what is a local need in their community and take themselves through a design process to go, how are we going to come up with an idea that will meet that need? How are we going to market it? How are we actually going to make money? And then when we make that money, it then goes back into
so it's
the
a real
community.
social entrepreneurial focus.
Absolutely. And it's enabling teachers also, rather than them being the repository of knowledge, it's actually them being the facilitators.
So you're pushing them into that coach mode that you were talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's a powerful program. It's all free at the moment, funded by Spark Foundation, that have really, gone, we need to reduce our inequality in New Zealand. So modelled off the $20 boss in Australia. So got some really good research behind it, and £6 a day with Richard Branson. We know it works globally, and we now need this nationally in our schools.
Fantastic.
I think the £6 thing was a reference to $20 per kid is available as sort of startup capital that we loan out. Some schools don't use ours, but there's a bank basically, and then they pay that back, and the profit goes to that cause. So they're basically baby entrepreneurs, and they're killing it.
Yeah, and it's that real life learning.
Yeah.
And you were talking about that teacher moving into coach. The other thing that I know is underway soon is the internships. Can you tell us a bit about the internship program?
Super excited. Our internship program cohort 2020 Auckland launches next on the 23rd of Feb, and that is 18 Auckland teachers who are exceptional teachers in their own right already. These are some of our best and brightest. They are already pushing into project-based learning, into focusing on 21st century skills. The thing that many of them don't have and have talked to us about is they don't have the connection with the business world.
Yes,
Because many teachers haven't...
Doing what you do best, connecting people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Many teachers haven't worked in professions other than teaching, and talking about the future of work and the skills that are needed in a modern workplace, and pathways into multiple different industries is hard when you have never had that experience. How could you know about it? So what we're doing is actually bringing together those teachers with some amazing businesses. So we have, I think, 9 partners at the moment. So in New Zealand, Google, Fusion Networks, Spark, and many others. You can see them on our website. And they're organisations that say we're really committed to getting much deeper into schools and doing it in a much more strategic way and much earlier. We don't want to come to a career expo.
So this is just not about teacher professional development, hey? It's about creating networks as well.
It's creating basically teams. And the team is made up of an intern, the teacher, and a business partner, supported by a learning coach. And the team designs a new learning experience for students based on the business partner spending a day in the school, in the shadows of shadowing a student, sitting there, going to lunchtime, unpacking, whatever. And then the intern spending 5 days in the business of the business host and doing a whole lot of work, which is really part of the design, which is the design process. So the observation, the shadowing of the business host, what do they do every day?
And it opens up the educator's eyes to what's going on beyond school.
To what this is about, what school's about, what work's about. A whole lot of doorstop interviews. How did you get to your job? What skills do you use? To all to people working in the business, and when we push that through a sort of, empathise, ideate, define, ideate, prototype, test process, what comes through is a learning experience for young people.
So it's giving back to the schools as well in terms of the resources that are developed, the connections that are made.
Yeah.
And how are people going to be able to follow these stories and see what's happening?
Well, actually, that on our social media, so we will be having, lots on our starting point, introducing our coaches, our business partners, our interns, and we'll be sharing stories as we go. So
fantastic! It's going
to
be really exciting.
Video. I think the other exciting part is really that capability. It's as our businesses really just move into that whole space of becoming learning centres, they can learn a whole lot from teachers. Teachers are really good at putting programs together, and they do flex in that classroom. So at times we think it's a little bit of a one way. This is not. This is actually moving both ways, and it's going to be really powerful to actually bust open a whole lot of myths and stereotypes that business have about teachers, that teachers have about business. And we actually want to break down the walls of both of them. And we actually would really like to think that when you're getting your registration over 2 years, it's compulsory. You have to do an internship, and it becomes an absolute requirement. And out of that, we then really want to see much bigger vision. If we look out beyond our field of horizon, and beyond the edge of where we can see, we actually want those businesses clustering around schools, kids becoming
collaborating
interns.
And genuinely collaborating,
it's
not tokenistic stuff.
And it's not ad hoc anymore. We've got these very ad hoc, unsustainable relationships that are driven either on emotion or through a CEO or a GM or because there's a vested interest on a board. We want to totally flip side that, Claire, and really it is about our capability for our business people and our teachers. They can become the new advocates.
And I must admit, as an educator who has over the last sort of 5-10 years, I've really had my eyes open to my real learning happening when I moved beyond the education system. And I've taken myself out to Net Hui and to all of those cross-sector events, and if there's anything going on at Grid AKL or over at the Beehive that I can get along to, I will, because I realise that's where the real learning often happens, when we open ourselves up to beyond, and I'm passionate about that concept of business and education and community, and us getting over this idea that we've got to protect schools or that they've got to be closed doors. I think absolutely right.
We're all in the same business.
Absolutely,
we're in the business of learning. We're all in the business of solving problems, doing better, loving and adoring and working with young people. That's what we all do. So why do we call ourselves different names and sit in tribes? That's crazy.
Well, I think there can be great tribes, but there are so many opportunities as AI does come through. What does that learning look like? How is space reconstituted in a business? And what's the opportunity for a junior school or a senior school to start to have a couple of days? I think we've really got to expand our thinking, that creativity, and we've got to trust. The Gen Z and the Gen Alpha, they are coming through.
Which one's a Gen Alpha? Is that because we've run out of letters? Are we now going Latin? Oh God, you're so in the future. Already, Faye.
They were born after 2010. Watching that coming.
Excellent. And so what's next? What else is on the horizon for 21C Skills Lab? You got stuff brewing?
Well, look, one thing we love doing, and we do a lot of, is we have a 21st Century Schools toolkit sort of training, development work. And so that's just a great way that we work with businesses, we work with school communities, teachers, and we are really helping people understand those 21st century skills, what they actually mean, whether what they have, what their business needs them to have, how they can, achieve them. And so we're building up, doing workshops around that. The other thing that's really exciting, and in a way it's a lower touch thing for us, but it's very powerful, is the Student Shadow Day, which is part of the Internships experience, but it actually stands as its own program. So we're borrowing it from our really good friends at the K-12 lab at the Stanford D School, and now at the D School,
it's got a massive movement, hasn't it? The whole shadowing student.
Student, and shadowing is known across many disciplines as a really, really powerful way of unpacking.
Massive empathy tool,
and as someone said, it's until you've walked in someone's shoes, that you have no understanding of where they're from, and how can you create solutions to that? So in the States, you get a lot of it is about people who are higher up in the education hierarchy actually coming and sitting with a second grader, you know, and so we want to open that up not just for the education system, but so business people, so mums and dads, so other people in the community can actually go, you know, they have a workbook, we help set it up with the school and share that insight.
We're going to do it as like a calendared week or anything? Is there going to be a period of time? Because it'd be a great sort of event to get a bit of momentum.
Oh, look, Claire, we'd love to have a national.
Or something like a group of schools could say, we're all doing Shadow Student Day today. You know, and this is the day we're doing it. We could have it as a national thing.
DisruptEd X 21 Skills Lab. Can see it happening.
And
it's a national campaign opportunity.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
we really think about if businesses have all these volunteer days now, there's some great opportunities to let them step outside, and that's where the greatest learnings. And they're going to take back a whole lot of thinking and ideas. And coming full circle, we said, how can parents help? That is an amazing day that they can actually build a whole lot of knowledge and understanding, and then start to build that back into helping shape what they want their school and their local community to look like.
Because it's not just about sitting and watching. You know, part of the process of going through is the design-based process is a hack. At the end, as we know, hacks are small. They're something you can get and done easily. They're little things. And
so it's not just observing.
No,
it's about
actually
doing something with what you're seeing.
The workbook is taking that through from insight to, you know, from an observation through to an insight, and then a hack that actually progresses that and learns more, and the learning continues. So if out of that experience someone thinks, hey, I could sit in the school quad every week and talk to people about their financial literacy issues or whatever it is, you know, that here's a need. I can quickly get in there
and actually you're touching on a really interesting topic like that I've thought about as a fairly new principal still. Like I've been in there 18 months, and we often, you know, you look at all the what you're expected to do and all the rest of it, and time again is community consultation. And to me this is a far more exciting way of community engagement than just, you know, having a meeting or sending out a Google form. You know, this is some genuine engagement, and often when we do community consultation, it's quite pushing outwards. The doors of the school still actually closed. We might invite them in for an evening event, or we might send something out to them, but we don't often have the courage to really let them into our teaching spaces.
A courage point, and all of this is, no one was brought up with these mindsets. You know, as a teacher, you're used to having control over your classroom and who comes into it, and you keep the parents out there to a large extent because you want to control the environment. But so there is a step of actually losing that control, and that is something that I guess schools and leaders within schools have to, you know, coach staff through. But the benefit that comes for that is hopefully something that will really make. I'm glad I did that.
And Claire, I think it comes back to that whole serendipity, you know, that creativity of actually the sidebar conversations that will take place on that day. And that's going to enable just multiple, you know, activity and tentacles to spread out from it. And I think we cannot underestimate the power of the serendipity through that whole day. And that's where we've got to really break down the walls. You know, to let that serendipity
and stop just thinking about it, our teachers as our teachers, because I know I have, you know, conversations in passing with parents where I suddenly go, you do what? You do what? What can you come and do? How can I get you in here? How can you come and do something? You know, and we've got to get a lot better at really opening our doors and somehow how making that more normal. You know,
they need to become the water cooler conversations.
But I mean, we're good at ideas, and you're good at ideas. But you know, I'm sure the disrupted community out there is good at ideas. But you know, message us with more ideas. But I mean, you can see some really exciting ways how you could, you know, do this for a couple of weeks, and then you know, have a workshop where you actually take all that stuff and putting it together as a school
and actually changing
and
things
actually
up.
do, you know. So there's loads of ways in which that experience of observing, of immersing yourself with a beginner's mindset, without all your preconceptions about this is what kids are like, and just actually doing it can unlock a whole lot of stuff that schools and parents and the businesses can do together.
So in closing, tell me, what's your one key takeaway for our teachers?
I still think dream big, you know, think really big about what the world needs and how you can make cool stuff happen. Don't let.
I'd say think big and break the rules. I'm a huge believer in just getting on and do stuff. And I often think one of the gifts of actually single cell classrooms is that you can get up to all sorts of stuff in your single cell classroom and get on and innovate and do it anyway a lot of the time.
Exactly.
My big to teachers, you need to be the change agents that you went into this profession. That
you can't wait for the school or the system to do it. You've got to just
They've
get on
got to
and
be
do
the
it
change
yourself.
agents.
Yeah.
That's it. You have to be the change agents. They have to. They've got the capability. A lot of teachers go into that profession because they've got enormous heart and amazing purpose.
Yeah.
So they've got to actually dig deep again and find that and become those radical change makers because it's going to take all of us to do this.
Yeah.
And it's about how do we just harness all this. It's the technology that's going to come with the AI that I think if you look at EdTech, it's so exciting what that tool that it can give you, and then you become the radical change agent with it. So I think there's exciting times ahead, and I believe that teachers can find that real excitement and that real purpose again because we want them to. You're in front of our kids for 6 hours a day.
And our parents, one takeaway for them.
Stop seeing school like it was when you were there.
Yeah.
Actually, think about the workplaces that you're now in and what you want your workers to have, and then imagine
what school could be.
What a learning period it could be.
Yeah.
And stop defaulting to the easy thing of that's how it was done in my way. You just get rid of that. It's gone. It needs to go.
And our young people, what's your message for them?
I really want to take the stress off them.
Yeah.
I want them to own, and I'm proud of the number of young people I see around me and who we're working with who say things like, I'm exploring.
Yeah.
And I want them to stay exploring as long as they can, because I don't want them to lock them into modes that are purely about stress and that just takes their brain shut down.
Yeah.
And that they don't do what we need them to. We need our young people to do the things that we haven't done.
Yeah.
My big thing is I want you to have your voice back.
Yeah.
You need your voice and you need to own that voice. And that's really powerful. When they can own their voice, they can create the change.
Yeah.
And we have taken their voice away. And they have got brilliant ideas, and by diminishing that voice, it gets shut down. That voice has got to come back. They are powerful.
Yeah. And we're starting to see it. We're starting to see it on the social media stages. We just we need them to lead the revolution in schools for us. Please. Excellent. So thank you so much. Thank you, Justine, and thank you, Faye. And so if you want to find out anything more, I encourage you to go check out 21C Skills Lab. I will add the link below to their website, and I encourage you to follow them on Facebook and Twitter so you can hear the great stories of our EdTurns as they get underway in the coming weeks. So thank you again for joining us for this week's DisruptEDTV. Next week we will be back here at the same time. I'm not actually sure what we'll be talking about, but we'll be sharing that online and give you a heads up over the next few days. So until then, have a fantastic week. Thank you again. Justine and Faye, it was absolutely fabulous having you here in the studio today. Awesome. Thank you.